What is going on, Legionnaires? Welcome to the Legion of Comics. I'm Mark, and today we're going to be stopping to look at what could potentially be DC Comics' next big summer event. We've got some clues out there. We've did some thinking and some digging, and I'm joined by none other than Mr. Sector 2815 to help me unpack some of this and get some of his ideas. So don't go anywhere. We're about to get into it. Shout out to the homies over at Big Time Collectibles. Be sure to check them out at their website, on their social medias, all that good stuff. Also, if you need anything cleaner press, my friend Justin can hook it up. Be sure to check the link in the description below. You can get direct link over to him. Let him know that you found him via the channel. And also, as always, a huge shout out to ABX Comics and Games, my LCS. They have a great Facebook group if you need a group to talk comics, tabletop gaming, any of those things. So be sure to check that out as well. But let's not waste any time. Try to make this as digestible as possible because I know I'm definitely long-winded and I'm really excited. And when those two things combined, I could keep you here all day.
We might be here a while.
Yeah. So what we're about to be talking about is what is DC Comics' next big summer event. For those that don't know, comics always have a way of having like their WrestleMania as a good comparison. Every year they like to do something that brings a lot of their stories and their characters together, and they typically do it in the summertime. You'll have smaller events all throughout the year and stuff, like we're wrapping up the Beast World one right now inside of Titans, but they always, when comics are doing good, when their continuity is good in their universe and they're able to keep their characters on the same timeline and connect it, they build up to big events, and it's really fun. It's a great way to get you excited for what's coming, to engage in more stories, and even go back and check on some stuff you might have missed along the way. So I'm a huge fan of the comic events, and DC has teased us with their next one. If you haven't seen it, I did a full preview video on this year's free comic book day, but DC Comics was keeping something very, very close to the vest, and that was none other than their free comic book day special edition, and it's called the Event Special. Every year, DC Comics is known to put out a book that kind of sets up their summer event. And we don't have a cover.
And if you remember, 2 years ago, it was DC's Dark Crisis. Last year was Night Terrors. Those were the last 2 years that they previewed in the free comic book day.
And if you remember 3 years ago, 4 years ago, they kicked us in the shin and didn't release the free comic book day that was supposed to be the lead into 5G. Right. And the only way to get that free comic book day was to go buy an entire flash trade paperback that they hid it in the back of if you wanted to see Wally with the Dr. Manhattan powers, which I did. I wanted those 8 pages. I bought a $15 trade for 8 pages. It was totally worth it.
I did too.
But yes. Dude, that was awesome. But without wasting any more of you people's time, I told you I'm long-winded when I get excited. That preview of that cover that they gave us, or lack thereof, it did come with a solicitation. And that's where we get most of our hints that have kind of exploded across the internet. I've noticed that people are speculating on what could be happening, and some people are excited and some aren't. Hence the video today. And let's look at that solicitation. It reads, "The prelude to the biggest DC comic book event of 2024 will drop on May 4th at all participating retailers. It begins. It's a story 30 years in the making, and its special free comic book day tale, an original story leading into the new series launching summer 2024. The final domino to fall, the final brick on the wall, and an epic scheme comes tumbling down, and the DC universe will never be the same. More details coming soon. No spoilers here." So there seems to be some cryptic stuff hidden in there. And it was a Popverse was a website that actually put out an article kind of detailing some of that. Not really, just kind of mentioning some stuff that it could be. That's what really spawned this video, because they put out an article by Graham McMillan on January 19th, and he added to that, "That said, a story 30 years in the making is a fascinating tease to drop. Back in 1994, the biggest DC events were the end of the Reign of Superman storyline, Hal Jordan's fall from grace in Emerald Twilight, and 0 Hour, Crisis in Time, which saw the DC universe rebooted from scratch for a second time in a decade. Could this new event be spinning out of one of those fan favorite comics, or could it be something far less obvious? 94 was also a year that saw the launch of the acclaimed Starman series from James Robinson and Tony Harris, for example, as well as the debut of Forgot Justice League member Triumph. And also, unfortunately, saw the end of the JSA that year, which was sad, and numerous deaths and the rest of them walking off.
They went off into limbo.
Yeah, it was not a good time for them. They're bragging about being young forever as they're getting killed from old age. I'm like, this is terrible. This is heartbreaking. But to touch on that, to look at some of the events that kind of got to this point, that they're going to be calling back to 30 years in the making, which has kind of been a thing that's happening recently in DC. We celebrated the death of Superman. We celebrated the return of Superman. And like they said, it was hot on the heels of the rain. But it all really kicks back off, if you look back for story context, to what gets us to this event at Crisis on Infinite Earths, as many things do. In 1985, the DC Universe was completely reborn. The multiverse destroyed. And that was really the kickoff point for the domino effect of events that are still being referenced till today. But cutting back specifically to 30 years ago, Paul, where does that get us?
That gets us to the end of the reign of Superman, and it actually that story actually crosses over into Green Lantern, and we have the destruction of Coast City as part of the reign of the Superman. Mongol and the Cyborg Superman actually team up together. They destroy Coast City because they want to make it one of like 4 different like portals, whatever that they want to use to bring War World to Earth, and so that obviously was Hal Jordan's base of operations, and so he basically kind of goes off the deep end as part of Emerald Twilight, which it runs through Green Lantern 48, 49, and 50. Not only does he go off the deep end, but we also get the introduction of Kyle Rayner as the first, the newest Green Lantern. And we see the appearance of Parallax. So what happens is Hal decides that he, in anguish or whatever, or in sadness, he tries to recreate Coast City with his ring. And what happens is one of the Guardians comes to him and says that he is basically violating the Green Lantern oath because you can't use your ring for personal gain, and that's what they see this as. That just totally drives Hal off the deep end. And he
Murder
goes
mode.
on, exactly. He goes into murder mode, and he basically kills a whole bunch of lanterns. He kills Kilowog. He kills some Guardians, whatever.
Sinestro.
Exactly, Sinestro. And basically, at the end of that, we're left with one Guardian, who is Ganthet. And Ganthet actually then goes back to Earth. He finds Kyle Rayner. He gives Kyle Rayner the ring. Kyle Rayner becomes a new Green Lantern. But Hal, in going to Oa, he also goes into the battery. And when he comes back out of the battery, having absorbed all the power, he is now Parallax.
And that becomes like a very iconic DC villain that reigns for some years on and off. And that's something that's kind of relevant to this 30-year trademark here that they're talking, this landmark time era that they keep referencing. And the story that really has gotten the internet a buzz with this whole 30 years ago is none other than Zero Hour, a story that was not necessarily well received at its release. It was by Dan Jurgens and Jerry Ordway. It was a well done story, but the meta purpose of Zero Hour was really to kind of tighten up some of the continuity issues left behind by Crisis on Infinite Earths. And the way that they decided to do it in story was really interesting. They took Hawk from Hawk and Dove, a future version called Monarch that was coming back and villainous and all of this and that. They upgraded the character by addressing that Hawk and Dove were offsprings of the Lord of Order and Chaos, and then they infused him with the abilities of Wave Rider to make the villain Extant. And Extant went on a killing spree across the DC universe using entropy at the beginning of time and at the end of time, and he was closing it in on itself. Essentially, it was an antimatter wave, just like Crisis, but on
Correct.
both ends of time coming in. So it was kind
And
of
that it ties into Crisis because Crisis was supposedly created when Krona went and tried to find that Krona was the one who released entropy into the universe.
looking at the hand of
Right.
creation and stuff. Yeah. And in doing all this, the heroes from across time is getting messed up. So you get a fun little crisscross of characters from here and there and everywhere and everything. But eventually, them trying to pull their forces together and stop Extant, they learn that Extant is none other than the Boy for Parallax, who is still here, and he has decided that everything is wrong. Everything needs to be fixed. He is aware of the crisis that happened before. Wave Rider is aware of it. All these heroes that were never aware of this crisis that happened are gaining awareness of it, and they're seeing how things have been messed up, and how Jordan has decided to use this ultimate power he has as Parallax to literally not create Coast City, but recreate the multiverse from scratch. And that's what this book served as continuity cleaning via that story. We saw the presumed death of Parallax from an arrow by his best friend, Green Arrow, straight to the chest. And at the end of the book, we get one of the classic famous DC timelines where they give you the where's what now. They kind of explain the history timeline of DC, and they take it all the way up to current and everything. And it was actually pretty cool. It was
Yeah,
fun.
it was 5 issues. It counted backwards. It started with issue number 4, it counted down to issue number 0. At the end of issue number 1, not only in Zero Hour number 1, but also in basically every single issue that was put out, you basically had you could see the entire universe. It was like being Thanos. It was
Mhm.
basically just you could see it ended up with this white page that was
Yeah,
just
that was
a
that was
blank
creepy.
a blank void basically.
Yeah. When you
And
read
then
it, that's creepy. When
right,
you flip to a two-page splash of nothing, you're like, oh wow. Then you turn the page and there's still nothing. And then there's just one little dialogue bubble from Parallax. Like, yo, they really committed to this. That's a lot of real estate they did nothing on.
right. And then issue 0 came out of Zero Hour, as well as every single title in the DC universe started with issue number 0 again, to give the writers and the creators a chance to basically redefine their characters, however, they give them a new start if they wanted to. So if you're ever looking at any of the like the comic book chronicles or the comic book catalog, that issue 0 that appears, suddenly like 30 years after issue number 1, that's the Zero Hour issue that basically, so it was kind of cool in a lot of different ways too, and they all had, if I recall correctly, all the 0 issues had this
Foil.
silver ink,
Yeah, it
like
was
this.
foil.
It was, yeah, exactly, which was kind of cool as well because come on.
So that's kind of like an update on all those events from 30 years ago that are being teased. But what does it necessarily mean moving forward? Because what the heavy speculation is, it'll have something to do with DC's Trinity of Evil, which is being kind of pushed right now. If you haven't seen the writing on the wall, what the Trinity of Evil is, it's Amanda Waller, Brainiac, and Zur-En-Arrh, which will bring excitement and major consequences to the DC universe in 2024, showcasing a bright future for DC Comics. The DCU is about to get a lot more dangerous as the Trinity of Evil stars in major stories across DC Comics in 2024. Now, while I personally don't necessarily feel like we're working to a Trinity of Evil event, there's somehow that's kind of still sticking to this announcement. I see all those characters doing things separately in their titles. We know that this all Superman Superstars is Brainiac's building up a big story. We know Zur-En-Arrh has been going for a while now under Chip Zdarsky, and Amanda Waller, though, that's the exception to that trinity for me, at least.
Mhm.
I feel like she supersedes any one title as she's already been seeded through everything.
Yeah, she basically is everywhere, and I agree. I don't necessarily see um, Zur-En-Arrh necessarily teaming up with Brainiac or Amanda Waller to try to take down all these heroes, because that's not really what Zur-En-Arrh is designed to do necessarily.
Mhm.
Um, although maybe he could become corrupted somehow, so it's always possible.
And
Um,
another point is also the fact that we do know that Waller has this secret Justice League of her own from Earth 3. We know that she has
mhm.
this Suicide Squad, like Apex Suicide Squad in waiting right now still, and she's still adding to that team. So I'm kind of thinking that in terms of like a story 30 years in the making, will they call back to any of this stuff? We saw them teasing the word final, final, final a
Mhm.
lot. We know that 28 years ago it was Final Night, the story, the event in DC where the Sun Eater was coming, putting the DC universe into eternal night, where ultimately Parallax himself saved the day by sacrificing himself and actually dying. That's where he was presumed dead numerous times, but that's the storyline where he actually died. And we know how Jordan just came back under the dawn of DC. We know Parallax has appeared in Green Arrow. There's so much we can speculate on, but really it's time will tell. Who knows whether this will all play out, but there's a lot to be excited for. It looks like DC's in a good place. And in terms of the meta point of Zero Hour being tightening up your continuity, if that's what they're doing right here as well, I'm very excited because they've been knocking it out of the park since Dawn of DC.
Yeah, and it seems as though, I mean, if you take a look at the Trinity of Evil, and you look at the House of Brainiac and Zur-En-Arrh and Amanda Waller, any one of those three really could kind of, on their own, could in many ways, hold their own, event type of a thing. Zur-En-Arrh could basically take on, the heroes of the DC universe, but to have all three of them going on at the same time really kind of tells me that they are really building up to something that's going to be huge.
It
And
feels
I
like a
agree. I
whole
think
new year to villain.
exactly, and I'm with you. I think Amanda Waller is going to be the one driving everything. Um, you know, Maybe she will find a way to rope in, Brainiac. And again, I could see Brainiac necessarily, not necessarily Zur-En-Arrh, but if it's a good enough story, maybe they'll find a way to do that as well.
And only time will tell. Be sure to leave
Right.
us a comment down below. Let us know what you think. What are your predictions for this big summer event? Are you excited if it is calling back to 0 hour? We've been seeing a lot of that lately. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Be sure to check out Sector 2815 right here on YouTube. He'll be live this Wednesday night for Guess That Key. Come by, see if you have what it takes to guess the key, win some prizes, and we'll see you guys next time. As always, he's Paul. I'm Mark, but we are Legion. I'm waiting for you to say it.
Oh, and you're now leaving Sector 2015, but you were never really there.
You were never